Thanks for coming out on a rainy evening for a fantastic subject we're going to tackle tonight, intergenerational housing. My name's Crispin Baines. I'm from Aging 2.0's New York chapter. I'll be moderating this evening. The format for the evening is we're going to first hear a little bit about Aging 2 from Max, and then our host, Senior Planet, Aaron's going to give us a couple of minutes on Senior Planet for you to find out a little bit more about where we are and some of the wonderful work they do here. After that, we have a sponsor, The Wild. Michael will give us a short overview on The Wild, and then we're going to get into the panel. And I know you've all done your homework and read the bios online for our speakers, and you don't need me to repeat those to you, and we'll give them some time to introduce themselves as we get into it. We're going to let the panel run till around about 7:15, 7:20, and please write your questions down, keep them, and we'll do an audience Q&A after that. We'll look to wrap up around about 7:35, 7:40, and do some networking and get you all out of here. Okay, so thanks for coming. I'm going to hand over to Max now just to give you a quick overview on Aging 2.0. Some of the faces I recognize, and there's some new faces, which is wonderful. So here's Max to tell you a little bit more about our organization.
Excellent. Thank you, Crispin. First of all, who here has been to a Aging 2.0 event before? Put your hand up. Awesome. So we have like a good mix of people who've been here before and not. So for those who haven't, welcome. We really appreciate you coming out. Aging 2.0 is a nonprofit that works to support the biggest innovators tackling the biggest challenges in aging. So what that means is that we're working to try and foster more entrepreneurship in the aging space to try and change the way we age. Not just about making, adding more years to our life, but really adding more life to those years, which is really what it's all about. So we're a nonprofit, and there are really three parts to what we do. The first is the local chapters, like us here, we're the local New York chapter, so we host a lot of events and other meetups to try and support our local community. The second is our alliance members. Those are larger organizations that are working more in the entrepreneurship style to try and bring more entrepreneurship to the aging field. And then the last is our conference. So we have a conference in mid-November. It's our Optimize conference. It's a really great time. It's in San Francisco. There's a lot of really interesting tech that's focused there. I highly encourage you to come if you haven't been before. It's a really amazing time. And so the other thing I want to say is thank you to one of our sponsors, Direct Supply. Direct Supply's mission is to enhance the lives of America's seniors through their commitment to senior living. They make all sorts of products and services for seniors that they sell directly to post-acute care centers. And their job is to build, equip, and run better senior living communities, and we really appreciate their support. And for that, I will hand it over.
Thanks very much, and Max and I will be hanging around at the end and happy to take more questions on Aging 2.0. Next, our host this evening, Senior Planet, needs no introduction really, but suffice it to say they're a wonderful partner of Aging 2.0, and only good things happen in this place. It's a remarkable story, and they've got some very exciting things coming as they continue to grow, but better to hear it from the horse's mouth. So, Aaron, here you go.
Hi, thank you, Crispin. I'm going to keep this short because I didn't know I was going to speak. I'm Aaron Santis. I'm the program manager here at Senior Planet. Senior Planet is our flagship program for an organization called OATS. OATS is Older Adults Technology Services, where we teach our own curriculum, not just throughout the 5 boroughs of New York City, but we're also in upstate New York, Plattsburgh, where we have another Senior Planet Exploration Center. We're also moved into Denver, Colorado, also in parts of Maryland, just outside of the DC area, and now San Antonio, Texas. OATS teaches their curriculum that's developed all by an in-house team. And this flagship program that I manage is our outward-facing brand, Senior Planet. And to become a member here of Senior Planet, the only requirement is to be 60 and above. And you can utilize this space for our classes. We also offer lectures, workshops. Our classes are developed in a quarterly system, so we just started our fall quarter. And our classes go for 10 weeks, and everything is free that is offered through OATS. There are also, you don't have to come by the center to be in a class. I always recommend members, if you sign up for a membership, spend some time here at our flagship program, because we do have a lot to offer. We have volunteers that will spend one-on-one and give you one-on-one tech assistance. Just utilize our Wi-Fi or our computers. It's a very welcoming environment. I'm not going to take up too much more of your time, but thank you, Crispin. And if you have any other questions, I'll be sticking around. All right.
Thanks, Aaron. There's talking the talk and there's walking the walk. And I remember coming to a Senior Planet event, and one of their members who'd walked into the door, who literally didn't know how to turn on a computer, was telling everybody about her business and telling everyone about Google Analytics. So it really does work here. It's remarkable. And she's 78 years old, I think. So fantastic. So moving along, we've got another sponsor this evening. It's The Wild. Michael's here to tell us a little bit about it. It's a startup that's taking place here in the city and is really trying to embrace intergenerational programming within a design aesthetic. So I'll give it to Michael for a second.
Thank you very much. I want the phone number of the 78-year-old so I can get her working. The Wild is a group of architects and designers from the hospitality sector, and we really have joined the fight to end ageism. And we think a key is to make the shift towards making maturity aspirational. As life transitions, our life transitions should be as exciting as they were when we were younger. You remember how you felt when you were going off to college. We want that to be the same way when you enter into the third age of one's life. We want you to have the same positive feelings about possibilities and connections and growth. And The Wild is a new urban community living concept that blends membership, private club, private residences, boutique hotel, co-working, meeting, and health spaces. And we're sourcing our first site currently in Manhattan. We were visiting a property today that was fantastic and really very, very exciting. So while the live workplaces and spaces and programming and events are open to the public, anyone can go to those. The private spaces are being designed, the physical spaces are being designed to be sensitive to the members' changing needs. And as they continue to evolve, so that content programming is tailored towards the modern elders' view of what growth and value of growth and engagement and enrichment are. So we think that as communities begin to really address the significant shifts in how seniors in society view aging, we're not going to need, and it will no longer be acceptable to have age-restricted communities. Our belief is really to put the focus on ageless communities and really begin to demonstrate the value to the greater community that these ageless communities can bring and have. As people live longer and they're more engaged, we want the community to be able to enjoy the values that come through that. So we have a nonprofit, Wild Impact, that is really looking forward to continuing to support Senior Planet and a lot of the efforts that are here. And we're hopeful, and we truly believe that the benefit from the contributions of intergenerational programming will become appreciated across the board. So thank you, and it's good to see everyone on a rainy night.
That's gives us a great intro into some of the themes we're going to be talking about this evening. So thanks, Michael. It's great to have you guys here. The panelists need no introduction. So I'm just quickly going to let you know we've got Noel, and we've got Mark, and we've got Donna on my far left. We're going to get into some questions, but I thought we'd just start it off real quick by, why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourselves and what you're working on, and if we can perhaps start with Noel.
Sure. Can you hear me? Yes. Yes, I'm so delighted to be here. I actually was in this space in March working with Aaron and user testing our product with some of the members here just behind that wall. So it's great to be back here. And this is an issue I'm really, really passionate and excited about. In New York City today, the over 65 population, as many of you know, is the fastest growing population. Right now, there's nearly the over 65 population in New York City is growing 3 times faster than the under 65 population, and nearly half are going to live alone. Today, nearly a third are living alone in New York City. So this isn't a phenomenon that we're seeing just in New York. It's actually happening across the country. And by 2035, 1 out of 3 households in the US will be headed by someone over the age of 65. And 90% of people say that they want to age in their homes and age in their communities. So that's really why we started Nesterly. Nesterly takes this age-old idea of intergenerational home sharing and brings it into the digital age. We connect empty nesters and older people with young people who are looking for an affordable place to stay. And in a unique twist, the younger people can help out around the house in exchange for lower rent. We are trying to take this old concept and make it safe and accessible and easy for more people to do as we're seeing this demographic shift happen. We also see a huge motivation behind what we're doing is the fact that we have an affordable housing crisis. And today there's over 54 million spare bedrooms that sit empty every night. So we'll talk more about it, but I'm really excited to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
And can you just give us maybe 30 seconds on Nesterly?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Didn't I just do that? Okay. So yeah. Well, okay, so Nesterly was started while I was a grad student at MIT. I came up with the idea. I'd been working in affordable housing for the New York City government and had worked as a public servant before that and was doing a master's in urban planning. And within 2 weeks of graduating, after writing my thesis on the topic, we had a signed partnership with the city of Boston. So we launched our first pilot last summer with the city. It went really well. It was a non-technology-based pilot. We just manually were running around the city, finding older adults, retirees, seeing who signed up, and pairing them with graduate students. Since then, we've been in The Atlantic and Forbes and the New York Times. We were in The Economist last month. We've gotten global recognition. There's a lot of traction around this idea. In June, I spoke at the US Conference of Mayors and presented in front of 250 mayors and was awarded a prize there. So we're seeing a lot of interest, and earlier this summer we launched a technology product that provides upfront screening, customizable home sharing agreements, an automated payment system so that handling rent isn't challenging, and ongoing support throughout the duration of the home share. And we're now scaling across Boston and offering this service for the wider Boston region. And we're looking to expand across the United States, and we're getting calls from mayors, from public policy people, from nonprofits who are looking to partner with us as a social enterprise.
Thank you. It's a great story. I wanted you to get that in there because we're trying to help startups in all stages at Aging 2.2, and what we always say is all about execution. An idea is great, but it's all about execution, and there's been remarkable execution at Nesterly, and it's a wonderful story. We're very, very happy to have you here. So Mark, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're up to?
Sure. I hail from the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., where they have a really good Aging 2.0 chapter, by the way.
Not as good as New York.
No. We'll see after this event. I'll make my judgment. And in Baltimore as well, where I spend a good bit of my time. So just glad to be a part of this conversation and love this place, too. We got to get one of these in D.C. I am here to talk about using housing as a platform for intentionally leveraging the talents and gifts, the strengths and the vulnerabilities of older adults in supportive housing developments where older individuals are living alongside individuals and families with particular social vulnerabilities. So what does that mean? I'll give you a couple of examples. A community in the great city of Portland, Oregon, called Bridge Meadows, where older adults live alongside families who are adopting youth out of foster care or providing kinship care for youth who would otherwise be in foster care. And there is an intentional commitment on the part of the seniors to be engaged and supportive socially in the lives of the young people and their families. They are not providing supports in a professional service way or conventional service format. It's really about the mentoring and the engagement that one human being to another we all need. Down in New Orleans, we have a great community there called Bastion, which is taking this same approach but instead of using it for child welfare involved populations, their focus is supporting wounded warrior veterans and their families who are dealing with lifelong rehabilitative needs. So it's a tweaking of this model. And I should say, actually, this intergenerational model is probably less a model in a defined sense, more of a philosophical paradigm that gets adapted, sometimes in idiosyncratic ways with these various communities, of which there are about 10 now around the country. I was also involved in a similar project in DC, working closely with a couple of government partners to take this same approach and apply it to support young women with children who are aging out of the foster care system. So that project, called Genesis, is about 28 units of all low-income housing where these young women and their kids are surrounded by caring older adults, and a couple of other families as well, not out of the foster care system. So there's more of a creative normalcy in that community. The approach is one that is easy to like. It's challenging to implement. It requires typically new construction, although there are some interesting opportunities to think about ways to kind of graft the philosophy in existing communities. One particular area that I'm working on right now is looking at ways to further adapt this model to support adults with autism and other disabilities who could live in supportive communities alongside older adults and families and individuals where there would be a reciprocal social commitment among all folks to be involved in one another's lives. So our focus is really about bridging that gap between good intentions and actions that proximity in a housing development can sometimes make more possible. We're about reducing social isolation, increasing social connectedness, and also pursuing various other objectives depending on the population being served. So very excited to be amongst not only a good friend in Donna, but great to meet you as well, Noel, and to hear more about how to take this objective of creating social connectedness with older adults in mind in a housing setting, and using that as really the focus of all of our collective efforts, which I think are so necessary in this day and age. Thanks.
That's great. Thanks, Mark. I mean, it seems like such a natural subject, intergenerational housing. It's almost like a reset to how we were originally. And but putting these programs together, especially in those types of areas, is incredibly difficult. So it's great to have people here that have actually done it and, again, executed well on it and can tell the stories and tell us about what works and what doesn't work. So it's great to have you here. Thank you very much. Moving along, Donna Butts needs no introduction. She's been fighting the good fight for a long time, and every time I speak with Donna, I learn something new about this subject. It's fascinating. She lives and breathes it. So I'll let her tell you a little bit about her journey and what she's up to. Thanks, Donna.
Thank you, Crispin. It's a joy to be here tonight with Crispin and Aaron, our colleagues at Senior Planet, and Noel and Mark. It's wonderful to have the opportunity to talk about this conversation about intergenerational housing. And I have to tell you, though, that one of the real treats for me tonight is I moved to New York about 35 years ago, and there were two people I met then who adopted me because I was so lonely, and they were kind enough to come tonight to say hello. So my dear friends Bob and David, thank you for being here. Everybody should be adopted when they move to New York. So Generations United, I've had the privilege of being the executive director there for 21 years. I was joking the other day and I said, thank God I can finally have a drink. But the organization itself has been around for over 30 years. And we were founded at a time when people were trying to pit the generations against each other. There was actually a journal cover that had a young person and an older person. They were both in battle fatigues. They each had a gun. They were back to back. And the message was march 10 paces, turn and shoot. Whichever generation is left is the generation that we as a country can afford to invest in. And our founders, who were the leading children, youth, and aging organizations in the country, said, no, we can and we should support our bookend generations, the generations that hold our civil society together. And they actually said when they founded us that we formed Generations United to argue for a caring society. We formed Generations United to argue for a caring society. And that's still what we do to this day, is that we advocate and we look for intergenerational solutions. Intergenerational solutions that make sense while saving dollars. Because really, when you think about it, it's better when we use our resources to connect generations rather than artificially segregate them and isolate them for so many reasons that we now know. But at Generations United, we focus in 3 specific areas. One is excellence in intergenerational programming. We do our programs of distinction, which is the Good Housekeeping Seal for programs around the country, and we elevate that work through shining a light on the good practices, an international conference that we do every other year, tools and technical assistance and things that we provide to increase the number of intergenerational programs in the country, and also internationally, because we do work with our colleagues around the world. We focus on spaces and places, making sure that we're using facilities, outdoor spaces, parks, everything that we have so that we can be used by more than one generation, and it can be used to connect generations. I get really frustrated with this whole age-friendly movement, age-friendly cities, which you probably have heard about. There's a huge movement that really WHO started to really help communities become age-friendly cities. But what you find is that they have a throwaway line about what's good for old people is good for children. And a curb cut is great for a stroller and it's great for a wheelchair. But what we say is, just because you have a curb cut doesn't mean that who's in that stroller and who's in that wheelchair are ever going to meet. You really have to intentionally work to engage generations. So it's using spaces and places like the Swampscott High School and Senior Center, where they didn't fight which one would get built. They built it together. So that's what we advocate for. And then grandfamilies, grandparents and other relatives raising children. We just released a new report on the Hill last night on the impact of immigration and deportation on relatives that are here caring for the children that are left behind. So those are the 3 issues that we really focus on. And using that intergenerational lens, over 7 years ago, especially talking with some of my friends and colleagues in Europe, we started to think about this whole intergenerational home sharing idea. And we published a report that included sort of innovative housing ideas. And I pushed the Urban Institute to include a recommendation on intergenerational home sharing. And a part of what they suggested was that if we just shaved a point off of student loan debt, that it would help a student and it would also help older adults who want to age in place. So how can we look at those kind of solutions? So we started really kind of putting the idea out there, hoping that somebody may be interested in this idea. We weren't very successful in trying to find funding for it. Till a couple years ago, we got enough money to begin investing in a feasibility stage. And by that time, I had developed an incredibly wonderful partnership with Dr. Ernest Gonzalez, who's here as well. Ernest was at BU when we first met, and now he's at NYU. And so we started kind of noodling this idea together and looking at why is it there are so many little boutique programs around the country. Why is it that everybody you mention this idea to lights up and says it's a great idea, and it hasn't scaled, it hasn't grown in the way that it should? So we really worked on identifying what was missing and what needed to be done so that it could be scaled. Because for us, the reason to do it is that it's time that we change the way that we live. It's time that we change society so that older and younger aren't separated, so that we realize that there's an intergenerational solution that can help older adults age in place and young people get a firmer beginning when they graduate from college. So as a result of that feasibility study and also our business planning, we came up with the next step, which for us was to start the national learning collaboration on intergenerational housing. So we just launched that the beginning of the fall. And we have several universities, nonprofits that are involved with that and developing that kind of learning community. And eventually the goal is that there'll be the national branding, there'll be the national marketing, there'll be that sort of what we need to create to really sort of tip towards this being something that people are really interested in and is sustainable. So I'll stop there. I'm delighted again to be here. It's great to, we're big fans of Nesterly, been big fans of Generations of Hope and all the work that Mark's done for many years. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Donna. That's great. So just getting into the questions. So just to start off with some context, I'm interested in each of the speakers' journey. We're all on our own journeys here. And the work that you've done and the successes that you've had, it's part of a journey. But going back to the start, what was it about intergenerational housing that was important to you, and what was the early objectives that set you on this course? And perhaps, Noel, you can go first.
Well, I think it really began as a kid. So I'm originally from British Columbia, Canada, and I moved to a small island as a kid. It's about an 8-hour trip and 3 ferries from Vancouver, and 1,000 people on the island the size of Manhattan. So I actually grew up in a pretty intergenerational community. If you didn't like the couple of friends that you had, if you didn't like you weren't best friends with the 4 people that were in your class and the 2 people in the grade above you, you had to make friends with other generations. So I had much younger friends, I had much older friends, and it was a big part of my childhood and my education was getting to interact with people from different generations as myself. And then when I went off to college in New York City, my grandmother lives in New York, and I spent a lot of time with her, and I continue to spend a lot of time with her. And she's one of my best friends and the closest relationships I have in New York. There was an interesting article that came out in Harvard Business Review a couple months ago that said that today we're living in a more age-segregated society than we've ever lived in. And I think that's something that a lot of people, it's troubling to a lot of people. It's kind of normalized a little bit in America, but we're the only place in the world that lives this way. So that's part of my background and what kind of attracted me to this model. And then it was really working in New York City. I worked under the Bloomberg and de Blasio administration. And one of my last projects was an $8.2 billion affordable housing plan. And I was working with the top experts, the urban economists, these housing policy experts, and it really didn't seem like we were coming up with enough solutions to address the affordability crisis that we're seeing in the city. Even an $8.2 billion 10-year plan was not going to make a dent for most people here. And so when I went back to MIT, I was really trying to study and think about what sort of innovations we can come up with to influence this kind of archaic industry that hasn't changed a lot, and it's still really expensive to build and construct housing. And I found out that there's 54.4 million spare bedrooms sitting empty every night in the U.S. So who has those bedrooms? It's older adults, many of whom want to age in their homes. So that's sort of how we sparked the idea.
Great. Thanks. And Mark, how did you come into this?
Well, I did not have the joy and the benefit of growing up with grandparents. Both my parents were the youngest in their families of 7 and 8 kids, and by the time I was born, my grandparents were gone. But I moved to Washington after college, and in a city full of young people, I ended up hooking up with the old folks, kind of unexpectedly, but professionally, I had an opportunity to work for several years with a gentleman who had been the Surgeon General in the 1980s in the Reagan administration. Some of you may remember, C. Everett Koop, the fellow with the beard and the big booming voice, was always wagging his finger at you not to smoke and to use the condoms. Yeah, it was.
Don't use them together.
No, not sequentially, maybe. Sorry. So Coop became a dear friend and a great mentor to me, and we spent a lot of time talking about the way in which our society was really marginalizing older people. And the age segregation is real, and it happens in every sphere of life, right? But Coop, who lived until 93 with an amazingly agile mind, said to me once, I remember it clear as day, he said, you really better figure out what to do with my generation, or we're going to bankrupt your generation, and everyone is also going to be left feeling really lonely. And I thought about that a lot, and then I actually I worked with him for a number of years and was thinking of moving on and doing some other things, and he said, follow your passion. We talked about this a lot. And he said, I think this was a real interest area for you. Well, then lo and behold, I picked up a highbrow magazine, I think it's Parade, which comes on the Saturdays, used to come on Sundays in the newspaper. And on the front page was a story about this community called Hope Meadows in Illinois. And it struck me. And I cut it out and tacked it up on the refrigerator. And then 3 or 4 years later, ended up connecting with the founder and kind of the impresario of this great idea, Dr. Brenda Ehart, and became involved with that organization. I now work as an independent consultant with communities that are trying to take this idea and launch it. But I have to give a lot of credit to my old octogenarian friend Coop for kind of bringing me into realizing the potential of connecting the generations in this way.
Great. Thanks, Mark. Donna?
That's cool. I didn't recall that part. It's wonderful. So, I can't look at anything or any opportunity or any obstacle without thinking about an intergenerational solution. To me, why do you do it if it doesn't involve people that aren't the same age as you are? And I think that that's just, it just has become a part, it's a part of the way that we work, and at Generations United, we don't even think about it, but we do see so many opportunities. And I would challenge all of you, the next time that you're thinking about something, whether it's because you're concerned about the climate, or you're concerned about how people are living, or you're concerned about whether or not your neighborhood is safe, is what's the intergenerational solution? You know, like when it's safe, neighborhood's not safe, there's great programs about nosy neighbors and intergenerational watch groups that take to the streets together. They map the neighborhoods, they do things like that. With the environment, there used to be intergenerational groups that would monitor water quality in their communities. But there's that intergenerational piece, because so much a part of what we call the grandparent advantage is that passing on the learning, the history, the sense of culture to the next generation. And if you're locked up behind a gated community, you're not going to pass that on. It makes me sick when I read about how wonderful it is that so-and-so retired is lecturing at his senior community about evolution and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, well, that's great. He's talking to a bunch of other older people, and you've got this whole world outside that would love to hear that. Young people that could learn those lessons and understand it. But for me personally, you know, I was really fortunate because I did know my grandparents, and it wasn't until I was older that I realized that my grandma and grandpa and my great-grandfather they were all ministers and involved in faith-related work. And I didn't realize when I was a kid that they had moved into a senior-only housing development and left as soon as they could. They hated only being with other older people. So I was 21 when I went to work at the YWCA, and one of the programs I inherited was a senior companion program that took high school students who were in sociology classes to visit with low-income, isolated older adults. And I had never really worked with older adults. I didn't really care that much about them. I loved teenagers. So I said, well, if the funding runs out for it, we'll just cut the program. And then I went out on my first visit, and I found young people that skipped school except for the day that they were visiting their older friend, and older people who didn't get out of bed except for the day that their young person was coming, because they both had purpose. They both had a reason to get out of bed, to show up, and to be present. And I thought that was so powerful. So we managed to find a way to continue to fund the program. And my favorite story about that was then a little while later we got this great front page story about the program, and they did a color photograph of one of the matches, which was a young man and his 82-year-old friend. She had lovely silver hair, and she was reaching across the table to pat his hand. And he had an orange mohawk and a black leather jacket. And her comment was, he may look a little strange, but he's such a nice boy. So to me, that's so much of what it's about, because when Noelle talks about the demographics, which are so true in terms of the changing demographics, we have to remember that it's a dual changing demographics, that we have an increasing number of young people as well, but they're of color. And they're keeping pace with the number of older white people we have. And if we isolate people and segregate people, we've got two populations that don't look alike, and why should they care about each other, and why should they invest in each other? So I don't think it's nice or sweet or fun. I think it's an imperative.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Donna. I'm going to stick with you for the next question. So intergenerational housing and the programs that you've been involved in, what are the basic building blocks you have to have for the types of programs you've been putting together, number one? And then secondly, what does success look like in these types of programs? If you could speak to that would be great.
Thanks, Crispin. I think that when it comes to intergenerational programming itself, and I think that is also translates into this work that we're looking at with housing, is, again, it has to be intentional. People need to be prepared. They need to be informed, because intergenerational programs can be more harmful than helpful. And there's some terrible stories about that. For example, an older woman who had arthritis that went to volunteer in a program, and the teacher was so busy, she just said, go tie that little girl's hair, go tie the bow in her hair. And the woman was like, I can't do that. And the teacher was too busy to even hear her say that, and she left in tears and never came back. So it's understanding people's abilities. It's preparing people, because it can be terrifying. I hate the idea of birthday parties in nursing homes when it comes to like taking a bunch of little kids once a year to a nursing home. It's terrifying. But if they're used to it, if they're prepared, it makes all the difference in the world. So we have to realize that older and younger need to be prepared. They need time for reflection. With the intergenerational housing, some of the things that we've learned as we've been doing our research is that as people look at home sharing, where the magic really seems to be, where the real connection is in the intergenerational part. For one thing, an older adult is helping a younger person. There's that altruistic aspect of it. It's also helping them. And it's that win-win-win aspect of it. So the intergenerational piece is really, really important. But it's also the lessons that have been learned, what we can take from everyone's efforts in that. And it's realizing that those matches, it's not like Match.com. You can't walk away when your coffee's cold. You're living under one roof. And so there's a whole lot to remember about the human relationship, nurturing that relationship, and that human touch. So that's one of the things that we've been looking more and more at, and why we're working with schools of social work as partners in this program.
That's great. Thanks very much. And Mark, I'll come to you next on the back of that, talking about what's important to have success and how do you measure success in your world. How do you measure success, and what metrics do you use, or what metrics do you envision using to just check that it's working and get feedback?
Sure. Really great question, and one that really wasn't at the forefront when this idea took shape about 20 years ago, actually, in this first community called Hope Meadows in Illinois, but one that increasingly we have seen as critical. I look at things also, I hope I look at it through the intergenerational lens that Donna preaches so powerfully about. I also look at it through a policy perspective. I'd love to see us figure out how to use policy to get these great ideas more traction, and that means being clearer about your outcomes, and it's challenging. This is not a conventional program. I'm talking specifically of the intentional intergenerational model that I'm working with. It's got programmatic elements, but it really is a philosophy that needs to be lived organically in these communities. And so it presents some head scratching for evaluation purposes. I will point to what I can say across the board we typically have looked at as being quite important, and that is a reduction in self-reported social isolation, an expansion, again, self-reported, of social networks as a result of living in a community where you have neighbors that are intentionally trying to connect with you and get in your business occasionally. But that's kind of broadly speaking. The community in New Orleans has different objectives as it relates to the Wounded Warrior veterans and their particular needs. And the community in Washington, D.C. that I mentioned, actually, probably of all the communities that have sprung up around this model, has the lowest income demographic and some really unique challenges because it is a very urban population. So there are some very basic issues of safety and stability, and housing instability, but also, again, just personal safety that community has been able to achieve that really aren't even on the radar of some of these other communities. So in that respect, I think it's, I guess an answer to the question would be there are some kind of Catholic small c objectives that you want to see achieved across the board, but each of these communities has some unique needs that we want to see addressed. The metrics that we're using are largely qualitative as opposed to quantifiable data at this point. I'd love to see as a holy grail some ability to demonstrate reduced healthcare spending as a result of this. That would be great. I'd also like a full head of hair and a Maserati. I don't know that we're going to get there, but it's really important. And more recently, I'll just say we've been doing our own kind of embedding of some good thinking on this. working with a terrific fellow from Johns Hopkins, Dr. Peter Rabin. Some of you may know Peter's seminal book, The 36-Hour Day on Alzheimer's Care. Peter is fascinated with this model and thinks it has enormous potential to particularly help with adults who suffer premature cognitive decline, again, by intentionally connecting the dots on socialization. So I guess I throw out that bona fide with him. We're working closely with him and other folks at Hopkins, and also with Kennedy Krieger, which has a world-renowned focus on developmental disabilities, to look at the evaluation plan for this project in Maryland we're developing for adults with autism and other disabilities. So it's a work in progress, but that gives you an idea of some of the objectives that we're trying to get at from a metrics perspective.
Great, thanks, Mark. And it's so hard to measure it. And I think Donna hit the nail on the head when you said it has to be intentional and authentic. And as you said, the metrics are difficult, they're qualitative, but when you get it right, magic happens. And perhaps, Noel, you can talk about some of the social impacts that you've seen happening with these connections that you've been making through Nestle.
Yeah, I think our number one metric is retention. So in the pilot that we did, 6 out of 9 of the pilot hosts have signed up to do it again and now have another student or young person living with them. And that means that it's really working for them, and there's a range in the type of people that are doing this. So our mission is to create affordable housing and help people age in their homes and age in place while building intergenerational connections. So we see a range of people on the site, on the host side. Some people are well off and have a really big house. They're empty nesters, and they're gonna charge $100 a month or $400 or $600 a month for an extra room. And other people, this income really makes a big difference for their lives, their quality of life. As you know, when people go into retirement, they often are on fixed and limited income, so making an extra $600, $800 a month can really have a big impact. And what we've seen is that both types of users have come back to participate in this, because it's not just the monetary benefits, but it's the social impact and the relationships that they're making. So that's an important metric. And then another piece that we're thinking about is just how do we make this safe and secure and more accessible to different types of people. So right now you can go on Craigslist and look for a roommate, and you could look for an intergenerational roommate, but there's a lot of people who wouldn't feel comfortable doing that. So what we've tried to do, what's really exciting for us to see as we're expanding, is seeing people that haven't done something like this before, who now, because of us, feel comfortable doing it. So someone who wouldn't go on Craigslist or wouldn't have a friend that knows someone who knows someone to live with, they feel like, oh, I've been kind of thinking about this idea, but I didn't know how to get started, or I didn't know how to make it happen. So that's where all of the features that we provide add value to those people. I think that's, yeah.
That's a great answer, thank you.
Hey, Crispin, can I say one thing?
Go for it, yeah.
I kind of made a light of the notion of being able to quantify reduced healthcare expenditures, but actually I do want to amplify from not only just a policy perspective, but when we talk about trying to scale up these ideas and look at being able to vie for Medicare reimbursement or support of some kind. I mean, I think it's really important. I don't have the answers, but I think particularly because our communities they all have a large, sometimes 100% low-income housing credit attached to them. At minimum, this tends to be 60-40 market affordable to market rate. We've really got to figure that one out. We're looking at using some pay-for-success models. Some of you may be familiar with pay-for-success or social impact bonds. I don't know that we're going to get there, but we'd like to get into that process of looking very rigorously at this and doing it in a front-loaded way with these projects before they really go up and are operating. So I think that's really important, and I'm not sure how we can exactly get there, but we need to.
Can I say one more?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sorry. You started it. I realized I didn't really talk about what the metrics for success were and what we were looking at. And the joy about working with NYU and Ernest is we have a team at NYU that are looking at some of the evaluation and research criteria, and that includes Alex and Rachel in the back that are working with Ernest on the team. And what we're really starting to hone out is, one, is it actually saving money? for the students? Are they actually, will their student debt actually decrease because of this? And then the other is it really enhancing an older adult's ability to age in place and to report, I think what we all want as a result of also being more and more aware of social isolation, that they're feeling more connected, that they're feeling positive about their lives, and that they're feeling more engaged. So those are some of the things that Ernest and his team are starting to hash out. And I would only add that what I find really interesting right now is with social isolation, we talk about older adults as feeling socially isolated, but the group that's reporting just as high a level of social isolation are people like 18 to 22. It's
Right
young
on.
adults.
Yeah.
It's young adults. And so again, when we think about that bookend generation and how we're going to have an intergenerational solution, when we think about social isolation, let's get those groups together.
That's a very good point. Thanks. And Donna's working on a remarkable project that she's just hinted at with NYU and hopefully a lot more universities to come online that goes after student debt and social isolation. It's just such a no-brainer, and it's exciting to see it start to take place. And I could talk forever, but now it's your turn to talk. It's a fascinating subject. I'm conscious about time, so I think it's time we open it up to the floor. If anybody has a question, I would just, I'll pass you the mic. Please state your name and please ask your question. Right here.
Good evening. I'm Norman Reese. I'm here representing the radical age movement, and we're trying to prevent ageism and trying to call it out. But my question for the panel is, I have spent some time in Florida where I see all these communities where all the seniors live together, and it just makes me cringe when I see this. But I guess the practical question that I have is, if a younger person lives with an older person and they have a very different lifestyle, how does that meld together? And are there situations where an older person and a younger person live together, but they do so many different things that are inconsistent with what the other person does, that they live together, but they don't really spend time together, or they don't form that connection? Has that ever happened in your experience? And if so, how do you deal with it?
Thank you. Does anybody want to tackle it?
You want to I mean, I've always got something to say, so it's not. There are a number of programs that have been started around the country, and one of the things that was very important to us is the role of the School of Social Work and the MSW and the NGO in the community, because of exactly what you're talking about. We don't want to just be a roommate service. We're really about building connection between people and between generations. And so and Noelle does all of this. She knows all of this in terms of the screening, the initial applications, the interviews, but also then there's that support of the actual combination too, to make sure that you do checks, that you're helping the folks to work out what may or may have been a sticker that they didn't realize that they were going to encounter. So there's that effort to make sure that the people have something in common. And I think we've actually been looking at 3 models. And the model I would mention to you is one that we're starting to see more of an uptake in, which is senior housing that are setting aside a couple of rooms at no cost for students to live. There's one in Judson Living in Ohio, outside of Washington, D.C., and many of the senior housing providers are looking at this. And what they do is they feel like the good combination for Judson are music students, so that they come in and they can provide entertainment and also coach people on their musical instruments. So they figured that way wasn't just somebody who might be in engineering school that didn't want to particularly hang out with people. These are people that want to be able to share what it is that they're doing. So those are going well, and they're working well. But I really do think it's that taking all the time you need to make the match. It's supporting that match, and again, it's not just leaving people to struggle by themselves. And also, I think it's also important for all of us to realize that it's not for everybody, and so that could also be a part of it.
That's a great point. Another question over here. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Adam Green from Klutch. We're a service that helps older adults overcome and alleviate loneliness. I'm just curious, because we know that loneliness drives behavior, and it often drives self-protective, self-centered, non-empathetic behavior that makes it actually more difficult to connect. And we also know that people are more likely to make friends with people the more they have in common. And so what intentional things are you guys doing that actually bridges that gap, especially if we want to get to the ROI question that you're asking, which, by the way, we're in the process of doing that now. We can connect the claims data and do all that stuff. So you should know that's coming. And it's not just with us, but with others. How do we get to the populations that actually are not well connected and not socially connected? Because 2/3 of the people out there are, they're doing okay in terms of it. It's the 35% or so that the recent ARP study and survey just came out with in September 26th that really are the people that are costing lots of money and are the most being damaged in terms of their health and quality of life issues.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's really important, and the ARP study is great, and I'm really excited about the work that they're doing to look at what are those barriers for older adults who they may have the intentionality themselves or the desire, but they just find it difficult. And we've certainly encountered that. I mean, the project I mentioned in Washington, D.C., you want a beautiful nightmare scenario, take young moms aging out of a pretty nasty government-run foster care system with kids, combine them with older adults in a fairly close living environment. We knew going into this it was going to be challenging for a whole slew of reasons, but we did a very extensive screening process. We did role-playing scenarios with all the applicants. We had quadruple the number of applicants for this community than we did actually space in the community. We had some folks who come through the interview process of sorts, and this all was done with, we had to crosswalk all this with fair housing, so that was its own fun little exercise. But we had so many folks who came in and said, this is exactly what I want, and you could look in their eyes and know they really were meaning it. But then they get in the community and they just recede. So in all the communities based in this model, and it differs from the iterations of it, there are staff whose job is not to be a typical caseworker, but actually to help facilitate these connections between folks. That's their job. They look at this ideally through a clinical lens, so they have that expertise, but it is very much focused on bread and butter kind of human connecting. And so they can do certain things, and there's some really skillful examples of this throughout the kind of network of these communities. But at the end of the day, I think we are realizing more and more we need to be even smarter about almost the brain science and social science of what it is that causes people, even when they are living amongst folks they want to connect with, that disempowers them to do that. So answering a question with a question a bit, but staff can do what they can. We are really excited about this burgeoning research because we think it will actually have real live implications for what we're doing.
So yeah, that's a really great question, and something that we were addressing over the last year and a half, because we do think this is a really exciting solution to address social isolation, but not taking the concept to actual idea. How do we recruit people to join who could benefit from this and who have extra space but could also benefit from social interaction? And as Donna said, this isn't for everyone, and we're not forcing this upon anyone. It's not someone in a nursing home and we're forcing them to interact with someone. This is a bottom-up solution, so people opt in. And a couple interesting findings from our pilot is that we had a large percentage of recent empty nesters. So people whose youngest child just went off to college. So they went off to college in the end of August, and by September they were ready to fill that room. So we were really surprised. We thought, oh, we won't have really recent, they'll want like a year or two just to enjoy some time not having kids around, and there was actually a lot of excitement and interest in this. And it's also a marketing tactic, which is not my specialty, but I'm picking it up, which is you can't say, are you lonely? Do you want a home share? The way that you turn it around is say, do you want to help a young person out in getting a head start in their career. And I think everyone can relate to having mentors, to getting help when they were young so they could afford college, moving to a new city and finding affordable housing so they can get that dream job for taking an internship. So everyone can connect to that, and it brings purpose and meaning into someone's life when they get to help a young person. So we don't say, are you lonely? Can we help you with your loneliness? We say, do you have extra space? Do you want to help a young person and be part of this story? And I think there's also, this is a little bit cynical, but having someone coming in and out of your home, even if you're not best friends, has a lot of benefits. When I go home on my block and I say hi, I just wave hello to someone on my street, it completely changes my day. Just even if we're not having a conversation, just to know that somebody knows me, I know them, they're looking out for you. And it's totally, the relationships that we've seen on the site have totally exceeded our expectations. Every time I talk to a host, they say, from 6 months ago, someone they hosted, oh, they just had me over for dinner, I met her new boyfriend, they're sending me letters, we're keeping in touch, and it just happens organically, and you kind of have to let it be that way. You'll be surprised at who develops relationships and what they find they have common interests in. Our first host and my favorite person of all time is this woman, Brenda, who's lived in her townhouse in Roxbury, which is a lower income neighborhood in Boston. She's been there, and her family's been there since 1946. It's 4 stories. She lives there alone. Her kids grew up. She's approaching 70, and she is fantastic. And we paired her with a PhD student from Greece. They seem to have nothing in common. I mean, absolutely nothing, but they spent Christmas together. She played him black soul music and taught him about American history. He cooked her Greek meals. I mean, food, music, people can connect on all sorts of things. So I think you have to keep the expectations low and let people connect in the ways that they want to.
I think it's a great point. It has to be intentional, but as I said before, when you get it right, then magic does happen. And we're all, it's a reset. We're all tuned to do this. You know, I think we all fundamentally get it inside. And so it's great to have programs. We're going to take maybe 1 or 2 more questions, and then we have to wrap it up. Did I see an arm go up at the back? Okay. Yep.
Hello. My question is about the nature of the transaction of how these relationships start. It seems like in all 3 of your instances, there's a very heavy touch in order to connect people, screen people, etc. And I guess my question to whichever of you would like to answer it is, how does this become self-replicating without a third party policing the transaction and the engagement? Like, how does this grow beyond what your respective organizations or the people that your respective organizations can never touch in the course of a day and just happen on its own? Like, what needs to happen before we can get there?
I can take this one. So yeah, this is why we started Nesterly. It's a marketplace for intergenerational home sharing. We were definitely inspired by the 3 phenomenon of housing affordability crisis, rapidly shifting population, and also the rise of technology and the ability of technology to help scale these types of solutions. So Airbnb is one example. Millions and millions of people are using this platform to create a marketplace. There's lots of other marketplaces that have become popular, and we've kind of taken the best practices from technology and marketplaces and mixed it with safety, security, and putting in kind of a human touch when necessary. So we've studied the model, the history of the model in the United States from the late 70s, that it came actually out of the Gray Panthers movement and Maggie Kuhn. How it evolved in the US, it moved over to Europe, this exact idea, and just talking to people, traveling to Europe, looking at every academic study, interviewing people that have run these programs for 30 years, but they only match 15 people a year, and trying to take those best practices of what's made their matches really successful, and then using technology and what we've learned to make it scalable and cost effective.
And I'd just add that Noelle is right that one of the elements that's so important in all of our work is safety. And people oftentimes will talk to me about, are you trying to put yourself out of business? I mean, are the generations just going to come back together and then Generations United can go away? And I'm like, no, if that happens, great, but that's not really what we think is going to happen, mostly because if we're going to be ensuring people's safety, if we're going to make sure that people have the best experience, there is that preparation. There are the things that we need to do to ensure that the program, the living situation, is safe. And when it comes to what you were talking about really was how you can scale up, our business plan shows that the models that we've been looking at should be self-supporting in about 4 years. With about 4 years of investment, that there'll be enough income generated and there'll be enough of a momentum that it's something that will be a little bit more readily available in communities and going at a scale that we think is going to be very helpful.
The projects that I've been involved with and I've talked about tonight all have required considerable resources to build and to operate. And we've talked about, is there going to be a moment when staff are not really needed and this can just go forth? I think for the particular populations we're dealing with, the vulnerabilities, and we're all vulnerable, so I use that word cautiously, but the intentionality is required is such that you're going to need some staffing. What I'd love to see, and I'm really fascinated by, is the notion that somehow we can take this philosophy and figure out ways to really make it practical to lay it over existing developments and bring together neighbors who won't require the kind of intentional planning and staffing support that the communities based on it to date have required. So I'd say that's a goal. I don't quite know how we'll get there, but it's really important to have that, in my view, as a North Star.
I'm sorry, there's one more thing that you made me think of, and that has to do with infrastructure. When you think about infrastructure in our country, we don't just build something, and unfortunately, too often we do, we leave it. And it needs tending, it needs maintenance, you can't just create something and then it's gonna go forever. So I think that maintenance piece, that realizing that if we've created an infrastructure and then we need to do the tending, the mending, and the support for it. But it doesn't take as much as it did to initially create that infrastructure.
I think that's great. So we're just coming up on time. So we're going to close out. There's a little bit more time for us to do some networking and please have a drink. Before we go anywhere, just I want to give each of the of our panelists a final closing remark. So if there's one thing you could pass on, a piece of advice, a lesson that's learned, anything you'd like to say in conclusion, please let us hear it. We'd love to hear what you have to think. So want to start with Noelle?
Sure. So I don't believe that we can build ourselves out of the affordable housing crisis. I think we need to leverage the existing space that we already have.
Fully agree with that. I do. And I would also say that however we achieve it, this notion of intentionally leveraging the gifts of older adults in particular, we got to figure out ways to do it. And housing in every application you can imagine. And I'm excited that we're in a small way a part of this and think it's got lots of potential.
Definitely, we're very excited about the potential. But in our reports, we oftentimes talk about policy changes and things that we can do at various levels. But at the end of the day, the last recommendation we always make is if you don't have somebody who's older in your life, find somebody. And if you don't have somebody who's younger in your life, find somebody. Because it really is, it's a one-to-one, it's an individual thing. And if you ever believed Pete Seeger, you know, one person's hands can't change the world, but when 1 and 2 and 50 make a million, we can do it. So it's that one-to-one.
Preach.
Wonderful way to round it up. So please, a round of applause for our panelists.
I gotta steal your line from now on. They're so good. I should be writing them down.
Thanks, guys. Thanks to Senior Planet for hosting us. Thanks to The Wild for hosting us. And please enjoy a glass of wine, a quick beer, and some
Good old
networking.
Pete.
Thank you.
Lots of wisdom from Pete Seeger.
So much.
Peter Pratt and all of those.
Yes.